My name is Eva Richards, and since I can remember, I have dreamed of the stars of Hollywood. I grew up in a small town in Kansas, where the nights were quiet and the stars seemed within reach. My only companions were old Marilyn Monroe movies, whose grace and magnetism fascinated me. She was everything I wanted to be: beautiful, talented, and eternally remembered. At 25, I decided it was time to leave behind the monotony of the countryside and seek my big break in Hollywood. I arrived in the city of dreams with a suitcase full of clothes and a heart overflowing with hope. I rented a small apartment in an old building, in an area that, although not the best, was what my budget allowed. The first weeks were tough. I faced rejections, unsuccessful auditions, and closed doors. With each no, my determination grew stronger. I spent sleepless nights studying scripts and honing my acting skills. The image of Marilyn Monroe, smiling enigmatically, always motivated me to keep going. It was on a cold, cloudy morning that my fate began to change. I received a call from a renowned talent agency, the Silver Star Agency. The agent on the phone, a man named Henry Collins, said he had heard about me through a casting director and wanted to arrange a meeting to discuss potential representation. My heart almost leaped out of my chest with anticipation. On the afternoon of the meeting, I wore my best dress and went to the Silver Star Agency office. The building was imposing, with gleaming glass walls that reflected the grandeur of Hollywood. Upon entering, I was greeted by an impeccably dressed receptionist who led me to Henry Collins' office. Henry was a middle-aged man with well-groomed gray hair and a calculated smile. His presence was imposing, but he spoke with a kindness that put me at ease. After a few introductory words, he got straight to the point. "Eva, you have a natural talent, and I believe that with the right guidance, you can become one of the biggest stars in this city." His eyes sparkled with an intensity that made me believe every word. "I'm offering you a contract with the Silver Star Agency. With our experience and your dedication, success is almost guaranteed." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Henry slid a contract toward me. The terms were impressive: access to the best roles, exclusive training, and a team dedicated to my success. Everything seemed like a dream, but then Henry mentioned something curious. "However, there is a protocol that all our stars follow. It is a set of guidelines and tasks designed to enhance your skills and ensure your personal and professional growth. It may seem strange, but I assure you it is essential for success." I did not question it. The anxiety of finally having a chance to shine overshadowed any doubts. I signed the contract without hesitation, aware that this was the beginning of my ascent. I left the office with a mix of euphoria and apprehension. I felt like I was about to embark on an extraordinary journey. Little did I know that the darkness of this protocol would begin to reveal its true face, challenging not only my limits but also my sanity and humanity. The first days after signing the contract with the Silver Star Agency were a whirlwind of activities. Henry Collins stayed close, guiding me every step of the way. I received acting lessons, photo sessions, and meetings with casting directors. The feeling of finally being on the right path was intoxicating. It was during one of these meetings that Henry introduced me more thoroughly to the secret protocol he had mentioned. He called me into his office, an elegant space with large windows offering a panoramic view of Los Angeles. Henry, as always, was impeccably dressed. "Eva, there's something I need to discuss with you, something extremely important for your career," he said, closing the door behind me. "To achieve the success you desire, there is an exclusive and confidential protocol you must follow, as I mentioned before. This is the secret behind Hollywood's biggest stars." He handed me a small black leather notebook. The pages were yellowed with age, giving the impression that the protocol had existed for decades, maybe even centuries. This notebook contains a series of tasks you must complete. Initially, the tasks are simple, almost trivial. However, as you progress, they become more challenging. All the great stars you admire have followed this protocol. My heart raced. It was strange, but the idea of participating in something so exclusive, so secret, deeply intrigued me. I opened the notebook and read the first pages. The tasks seemed harmless. Watch a classic Hollywood movie every night and write down my impressions. Attend a morning yoga class for a month. Meditate for 20 minutes every day. That doesn't seem too difficult, I commented, looking at Henry. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't decipher. These are just the first steps, Eva. As you adapt, the tasks will evolve. The most important thing is that you follow the protocol to the letter. We believe it not only enhances your skills, but also strengthens your mind and spirit for the industry's challenges. I was determined to do whatever it took to achieve success. That night, I started watching classic films and writing my impressions. I plunged into yoga and meditation with fervent dedication. The weeks passed quickly, and soon I had completed the notebook's initial tasks. With each passing day, I felt more connected to Hollywood's brilliance, closer to my dream. But deep down, a small voice of caution whispered to me, questioning the true purpose behind the secret protocol. Nevertheless, I ignored these thoughts, focused on my greater goal. When I finished the initial tasks, Henry called me back to his office. This time he was more serious, almost grave. Eva, you're doing very well. Now it's time to move on to the next phase of the protocol. The next tasks will demand more from you, both physically and emotionally. But remember, all the greatest stars have gone through this. Are you ready for the weight of fame? I took a deep breath and nodded. I was ready for anything, or so I thought. The first tasks of the secret protocol were not difficult. The nights spent watching classic films and the days started with yoga and meditation quickly became routine. I felt more centered, more prepared to face the industry's challenges. However, the black leather notebook did not stop there. The following week, Henry handed me a new set of tasks. Upon opening the notebook, I noticed the tone had changed. The new demands involved more social interaction and less introspection. The first task was to attend an exclusive event organized by one of Hollywood's biggest producers. My presence there was to be more than a mere appearance. I needed to impress the right people, create connections that could boost my career. The event took place in a luxurious mansion in Beverly Hills. As soon as I entered, I was overwhelmed by the grandeur of the place. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, illuminating a crowd of famous and influential faces. The atmosphere was a kaleidoscope of luxury and power. Dressed in a stunning gown and with a confident smile, I mingled with the guests. Henry introduced me to several important people, highlighting my promise as an actress. I noticed some looks were evaluative, almost clinical. I felt like a fish out of water but maintained my composure. The task seemed simple. Socialize, make contacts, leave a good impression. However, there was something in the glances and whispers that made me uneasy. After the event, I was invited to perform small shows at private parties. These occasions were opportunities to showcase my talent in a more intimate setting. The first performances were pleasant, but soon disturbing nuances began to emerge. At one of these parties, held at a famous director's house, I was asked to perform a dramatic scene from a classic film. So far, so good. But during the performance, I noticed some guests watching me with an uncomfortable intensity. It wasn't just admiration. There was something more, something dark. After the performance, one of the guests, an older man with a piercing gaze, approached me. "You have raw talent, Eva," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'd like to see more of you in a more private setting. It could be very advantageous for your career." I politely declined, but the feeling of discomfort lingered. When I shared my concerns with Henry, he dismissed them. "These things are part of the game, Eva. You need to learn to deal with this kind of attention. It's part of the process of becoming a star." As the tasks progressed, the disturbing nuances intensified. On another occasion, I was instructed to attend a dinner with a select group of industry executives. The conversation was courteous, but I felt there was an underlying layer of tension, as if something was left unsaid. After dinner, I was taken to a private room where one of the executives asked me to perform an emotionally intense scene, without prior notice. The atmosphere was charged, and as I acted, I felt as if I was being watched not only by those present but by something more, something invisible and insidious. The initial demands of the protocol, which initially seemed trivial, began to reveal a dark side of the industry. I was being tested, not only in my acting skills but in my ability to handle increasingly uncomfortable and morally ambiguous situations. The feeling of unease grew within me, but the promise of success and stardom continued to drive me. As the weeks passed, the tasks continued to escalate in complexity and discomfort. I began to understand that the path to stardom in Hollywood was not paved only with talent and perseverance, but also with choices that tested the limits of my morality and humanity. It was on a particularly cold night that I received a call from Henry. His voice, usually calm and confident, sounded tense. "Eva, there's an important event tonight, and your presence is essential." He paused before continuing. "But there's something I need to discuss with you personally. Let's meet in my office in an hour." I arrived at Henry's office. He was sitting at his desk, eyes fixed on a document that seemed to weigh more than just paper. When he saw me, he gestured for me to sit down. "Eva, you've been doing exceptionally well so far, but now we're entering a more delicate phase." He slid an envelope toward me. "Inside this envelope is the next step. It involves a favor for one of Hollywood's biggest producers. Your career could take off after this, but it requires a difficult decision." I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter detailing my next task. I was to seduce a promising young actor at an event and ensure he committed an act that could compromise his career. In exchange, the producer promised a leading role in a highly anticipated film. I was in shock. The task did not involve just performance or socialization but manipulation and betrayal. It was a calculated move to ruin someone's career for personal gain. My heart pounded as I read and reread the letter. "Henry, I can't do this." My voice came out as a whisper. "This is wrong. I can't destroy someone's life to advance my own career." Henry sighed deeply and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Eva, the world of entertainment is cruel and ruthless. Opportunities are rare and fiercely contested. Those who reach the top do what is necessary. If you're not willing to make sacrifices, perhaps this is not the path for you." I left Henry's office with my mind in turmoil. I walked the illuminated streets of Los Angeles, trying to process everything. I remembered Marilyn Monroe's words in one of her films. "It's better to be unhappy alone than unhappy with someone." But what if the price of happiness was someone else's unhappiness? I arrived at the event that night with a heavy heart. The mansion where the party was held was full of lights and laughter. I felt like a puppet in a much larger game than I could imagine. The young actor, the target of the task, was charming and genuine. As we talked, I felt a wave of guilt and repulsion grow inside me. He had dreams, hopes just like me. At the crucial moment, when I was supposed to execute the plan, I hesitated. I looked into his eyes and saw a reflection of my own ambition and innocence. The internal battle was intense, but the promise of success was tempting. I took a deep breath and decided to go ahead, convincing myself that it was just a necessary move on Hollywood's great chessboard. I made the young actor drink more than he should have, and then led him to one of the mansion's private rooms. I encouraged him to make wrong decisions, to act recklessly. Under my influence, he ended up getting into a fight with another important guest, a producer known for his volatile temper. The situation quickly spiraled out of control. The young actor was expelled from the party, and the next day, news of his scandalous behavior was in all the tabloids. His reputation was destroyed in a matter of hours. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, knowing I had caused it. When I returned to Henry's office the next day, he greeted me with a satisfied smile. "Well done, Eva. You did what was necessary," he said, handing me a new contract. "The producer was impressed with your determination and coldness. Are you ready for the next step?" I signed the contract, but the victory had a bitter taste. The young actor, whose name was now tarnished, disappeared from the headlines as quickly as he had appeared. I heard he left Los Angeles, his career ruined before it even began. The weight of my choice haunted me, but the success I had longed for was closer than ever. I had crossed a moral line, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. Fame and success were within my reach, but the cost was high, and with each step, my soul seemed to move further away from the light. After completing the task that had destroyed the young actor's career, my rise at the Silver Star Agency was swift. The promises made by Henry began to materialize. Auditions for leading roles, invitations to exclusive events, and praise from influential figures in the industry. However, with each step forward, I felt an increasing weight on my shoulders, a burden that became harder to bear. The subsequent tasks began to reveal an even darker side of the industry. I found myself in situations that tested not only my morality but also my sanity. One task required me to plant false information about a fellow actress, insinuating she was involved in illegal activities. Each completed task seemed to cut a piece of my soul. I began to avoid my old friends, unable to share with them what was happening. Isolation became a constant in my life. The only people I interacted with were those within the agency, and even among them, I felt a coldness and distance that hadn't been there before. Henry, who initially seemed like a trustworthy mentor, became an intimidating figure. His presence, which once brought me comfort, now only increased my anxiety. He constantly pressured me, reminding me of the consequences of failure or questioning the protocol. The meetings in his office were tense, and I left with the feeling of being constantly watched. My nights were tormented by nightmares. I dreamed of the young actor whose career I had destroyed, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. Sleep, when it came, was a brief escape from reality but also an arena of torment. Colleagues within the agency also began to treat me differently. There were furtive glances and whispers behind my back. Some seemed to envy my rapid rise, while others looked at me with distrust and fear. I wondered how many of them were also following the protocol and what horrible tasks they had been forced to complete. The constant pressure and isolation began to affect my performance. At an important audition, I felt my hands tremble and my voice falter. The director, a severe and impatient man, frowned and said he expected more from someone with my reputation. I left the room feeling a wave of panic. Was I losing my control? Was the cost of fame driving me to the brink of madness? One day, while walking through the agency's corridor, I met Sarah, a veteran actress also represented by Silver Star. She pulled me aside, her face a mask of concern. "Eva, we need to talk," she whispered, looking around as if afraid of being heard. "I know what you're going through. I also followed the protocol, did things that haunt me to this day. But there is a limit, Eva. You can't let them destroy you. Her words resonated within me, sparking a resistance I thought I had lost. Sarah explained that the protocol was a network of manipulation and control, created to ensure the loyalty and obedience of emerging stars. She told stories of other actors and actresses who had succumbed to the pressure, some disappearing mysteriously, others facing personal tragedies. You need to find a way out before it's too late, she warned, her eyes shining with desperate urgency. But leaving was not a simple option. The agency had immense control over my career and my life. The implied threats from Henry and the power he wielded were real and terrifying. Still, the conversation with Sarah planted a seed of doubt and resistance within me. In the following days, I began to notice small things that had previously gone unnoticed. Phone calls that seemed to be monitored, documents mysteriously disappearing, and the constant feeling of being watched. The pressure and isolation were suffocating, but the spark of resistance grew stronger. As the tasks became darker and more demanding, I knew I needed to find a way out of this cycle of manipulation and control. The cost of fame was becoming unbearable, and I wasn't willing to sacrifice my sanity and humanity in exchange for a place in stardom. After the conversation with Sarah, a constant restlessness took hold of me. Each day at the Silver Star Agency seemed darker, and the tasks of the secret protocol were leading me down an increasingly disturbing path. I felt trapped in a web of manipulation and control, but the spark of resistance that Sarah had planted in me kept me alert. It was on a rainy night that Henry summoned me for a last-minute meeting. His office was lit only by a desk lamp, creating elongated shadows on the walls. He handed me a new set of instructions, this time with a grave and somber look. Eva, you have been an exemplary participant of the protocol. Now it's time to advance to the next phase. He paused, his eyes piercing mine. You will be introduced to rituals that are essential for absolute success. They are ancient traditions, kept secret by the greatest stars. Prepare yourself, for these experiences will test the limits of your integrity and sanity. Henry's words echoed in my mind as I read the instructions. The first task seemed simple: attend a dinner in an old mansion in the Hollywood Hills. But what happened that night was anything but simple. I arrived at the mansion, a Gothic structure with towers and stained glass windows that glowed with candlelight. I was greeted by a hooded figure who guided me through labyrinthine corridors to a room where other guests were already gathered. Everyone was dressed in formal attire, and an atmosphere of tension hung in the air. In the center of the room was a circle drawn with strange, incomprehensible symbols. We were instructed to position ourselves around the circle and recite words in an ancient language. The air seemed to vibrate with malevolent energy, and the sense of danger was palpable. As the ritual progressed, I felt increasing pressure in my head. The words we recited seemed to erode my sanity. The hooded figures began to chant louder, and a figure emerged from the shadows, an entity that appeared to be made of pure darkness. Its empty gaze met mine, and a wave of terror swept through my body. The ritual ended abruptly, and we were dismissed without explanation. I returned home with my mind in turmoil, feeling drained and haunted by what I had witnessed. The following nights were tormented by nightmares, visions of the dark entity that seemed to watch me even in my most private moments. The second ritual was even more bizarre. I was instructed to participate in a purification ceremony in an isolated forest. The instructions were clear. I should be alone, without communication with the outside world. I arrived at the location at dusk, following a torchlit path to a clearing. There I found a rudimentary stone altar surrounded by ancient symbols, and a large owl statue. I was forced to perform a series of acts that seemed straight out of a nightmare, reciting incantations, making blood offerings, and entering a deep trance. During the trance, I had horrible visions of hooded figures and even more macabre rituals, all of which seemed to promise power in exchange for parts of my soul. When the ritual ended, I felt exhausted, as if something vital had been torn from me. My hands trembled, and fear rooted deeply in my mind. I returned home but could not escape the feeling of being watched, of having awakened something in that forest. With each ritual, my integrity and mental health were tested. I was instructed to participate in an invocation ceremony in an abandoned theater, where the walls seemed to whisper ancient, dark secrets. The participants, all in ceremonial garb, chanted incantations that reverberated through the empty space, while a central figure, a sinister priest, conducted the ceremony. At the climax of the ritual, a spectral figure appeared, floating above the stage. Its presence was overwhelming, and I felt a wave of dread and fascination. The entity spoke words in an unknown language, and an invisible force seemed to envelop my body, pushing my mind to its limits. These rituals compromised my integrity in ways I never imagined. Each ceremony seemed to tear a piece of my soul, replacing it with growing darkness. The hooded figures, ancient symbols, and dark entities became a constant in my life. I began to question my own sanity, unable to distinguish reality from delusion. Henry continued to pressure me, his smooth, persuasive voice becoming a constant presence in my mind. He assured me that all this was necessary, that the greatest successes required deep, incomprehensible sacrifices. But more and more, I wondered if the price of success was worth it, or if I was completely losing myself in the process. The isolation and pressure were unbearable, but I knew I was on a path with no return. The only way out was to move forward, face the bizarre and dark rituals that compromised my soul and sanity, in the hope of finding a way to escape the clutches of the Silver Star Agency. The weeks that followed the rituals were a blur of fear and paranoia. Each completed task seemed to pull tighter the thin string that held my sanity. The constant presence of hooded figures, sinister chants, and visions of dark entities had become a recurring nightmare. But what really began to terrify me were the disappearances. It all started with subtle rumors. A fellow actor, Jeremy, didn't show up for an important meeting. Questions about his whereabouts were answered with vague murmurs that he had taken a vacation. But as weeks passed without any news, suspicions began to grow. Jeremy was known for his dedication. The idea that he simply disappeared was unsettling. The following week, it was Cassandra's turn, an actress I knew well. She was progressing quickly, just like me. During an event, she mentioned being worried about the rituals and their consequences. The next night, Cassandra disappeared without a trace. Her apartment was untouched, her clothes and personal belongings still there. No signs of struggle or planned departure. The disappearances began to pile up. People I knew, who were also following the protocol, simply vanished. Each absence left a void filled with rumors and growing fear. The walls of the Silver Star Agency seemed to close in, the corridors becoming dark labyrinths echoing with whispers of unspeakable secrets. Henry, as always, maintained his calm and controlled facade. When I confronted him about the disappearances, he looked at me with a chilling coldness. "Eva, the world of entertainment is unpredictable. People come and go. It is a competitive and demanding environment. Focus on your tasks and don't get distracted by rumors." But that wasn't enough to reassure me. The idea that my colleagues were simply leaving without warning seemed absurd. I began to watch my steps more carefully, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the moment when it would be my turn to disappear. One night, after a long day of filming, I received a text message from an unknown number. Meet me at the cafe on the corner of 5th and Main midnight. Urgent. My heart raced. Could it be Cassandra or Jeremy? Or some other colleague trying to communicate secretly? I arrived at the cafe with a mix of hope and fear. The place was almost empty, except for a figure sitting in a dark corner. It was Sarah, the veteran actress who had warned me about the dangers. "Eva, you are in great danger." Her words were an urgent whisper. The disappearances are no coincidence. They are eliminating those who become a risk, those who know too much or who start to question the protocol or threaten to expose information. But why? My voice trembled. What is happening, Sarah? Why are they doing this? It's about control, a way to ensure no one exposes what really happens here. She looked around as if afraid of being heard. The secret protocol is not just about achieving success. It's about power, control, and sacrifices. They manipulate us, use us, and when we are no longer useful or become a threat, we are eliminated. The revelation was a devastating blow. My mind whirled with the weight of the implications. I was involved in something much bigger and more sinister than I ever imagined. Sarah gave me a disposable phone and an address. "If you need help, call this number. And if you feel you're in imminent danger, go to this address. Some people are trying to expose the truth." She stood up quickly, giving me one last warning look. "Take care, Eva. They are always watching." In the following days, fear and paranoia only increased. The agency's corridors seemed emptier, every shadow more threatening. I began to notice figures that seemed to follow me, watching my movements. Every missed call, every step echoing in the deserted corridors, intensified the feeling that my time was running out. The Silver Star Agency, once a symbol of hope and success, had turned into a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. The secret protocol, initially a series of tasks aimed at achieving fame, had revealed itself as a dark pact with forces I could not fully comprehend. And now, with colleagues mysteriously disappearing, the cost of fame was becoming clearer and more terrifying than I ever imagined. I knew I needed to find a way out before I became the next victim. The battle for my sanity and life was just beginning, and the path ahead would be full of unimaginable dangers and impossible decisions. Paranoia had become my constant companion. Every day at the Silver Star Agency was a struggle to maintain sanity as the line between reality and nightmare became increasingly blurred. The disappearance of colleagues and the growing sense of being watched left me in a constant state of alert. It was in this environment of fear and distrust that the supernatural forces began to manifest, revealing unimaginable horrors and the true nature of the agency. It all started subtly. One day, while practicing a monologue in my dressing room mirror, I saw a shadow move behind me. I turned quickly, but no one was there. The mirror reflected only myself and the empty room. But the feeling of being watched was undeniable. The shadow seemed to have a presence, a weight that made the air around me feel heavier. That night, I woke from a restless sleep with the feeling that there was someone in my room. I opened my eyes and, for a brief moment, saw an indistinct figure standing in the corner of the room. Its eyes glowed with a cold, supernatural light. I blinked, and the figure disappeared, leaving me gasping and covered in cold sweat. The visions became more frequent, each time more vivid and terrifying. One night, after a long day of shooting, I received a call from Sarah. Her voice was full of urgency and fear. "Eva, I found something. We need to meet. Come to the address I gave you now." She hung up before I could respond. I arrived at the location, an old, worn-out house in the suburbs of Los Angeles. Sarah greeted me at the door, with deep dark circles under her eyes and a look of desperation. She led me to a basement lit only by candles, whose shadows danced on the stone walls. "What did you find, Sarah?" I asked, trying to hide my nervousness. She pulled out an old wooden box and opened it, revealing a collection of documents and photos. Among them was a dust-covered diary, which Sarah placed in my hands. "This diary belonged to an actress who disappeared decades ago," Sarah explained. "She also followed the secret protocol, and her notes reveal something terrifying." I opened the diary carefully, feeling a wave of apprehension. The pages were filled with detailed descriptions of the rituals, similar to those I had participated in. But there was something more, something much worse. The actress mentioned visions of supernatural entities, dark figures that appeared during the rituals, demanding sacrifices in exchange for success. "These entities are real, Eva," Sarah continued. "They are part of the secret protocol. The Silver Star Agency is not just a talent agency. It's a front for something much older and more malevolent. These rituals are pacts with supernatural forces that demand a terrible price." As Sarah spoke, the pieces began to fit together. The hooded figures, the chants in unknown languages, the mysterious disappearances. It all was part of a dark plan. The agency was involved in a game of power and manipulation with forces beyond human comprehension. That night, I had a dream that felt more real than life itself. I was in a dark hall, surrounded by the hooded figures that had become so familiar. In the center of the hall, an imposing entity made of shadows and fire watched me with eyes that glowed like embers. Its voice echoed in my mind, a mixture of whispers and screams. "Eva, you have done well to follow the protocol, but the real test is yet to come. You must decide how far you are willing to go for the success you desire. The price is high, and the choice is yours." I woke up with a scream caught in my throat, the echo of the entity's words still resounding in my mind. I felt marked, chosen for something I did not fully understand. Reality and the supernatural had intertwined in an inescapable way. In the following days, the supernatural events intensified. Objects moved on their own. Shadows danced on the walls. Incomprehensible whispers filled the silence. I felt surrounded by a constant presence, an invisible force watching and manipulating me. I confronted Henry again, this time determined to get answers. "Henry, what is happening?" My voice trembled with anger and fear. "What are these forces? What really is this protocol?" He looked at me with an enigmatic smile, his eyes shining with a light I had never seen before. "Eva, the protocol is more than a path to success. It is a pact with forces that transcend this world. Those who follow it must be willing to pay the price. You have already proven to be worthy, but there is still much to be done." His answer confirmed my worst fears. I was involved in something ancient and malevolent, something that demanded more than I was prepared to give. But escaping was not an option. The forces I had awakened were determined to keep me under their control. I knew I needed help. Sarah and I began planning a way to expose the truth, to reveal the horrors of the secret protocol to the world. But the entities would not allow us to escape so easily. The approaching battle would be the hardest of all, a fight for my soul against forces that had controlled stars for generations. The true nature of the Silver Star Agency and the secret protocol was revealing itself, and the cost of success was higher than I could ever imagine. The path ahead was filled with shadows and unimaginable dangers, but I was determined to fight until the end. The knowledge of the supernatural forces involved turned my fear into despair. The revelations about the true nature of the Silver Star Agency haunted me at every moment. I knew I needed to escape, but the agency had eyes and ears everywhere, and the feeling of being watched was oppressive. Sarah and I spent nights planning an escape. She had discovered an underground network of individuals who, like us, were trying to expose the truth behind the rituals and the agency. The idea was simple but risky. Gather enough evidence to incriminate the Silver Star and, at the same time, escape their domain before it was too late. That night, while we reviewed our plans, I felt a presence in the room. The lights flickered, and shadows danced on the walls in a sinister way. I looked at Sarah, who was as tense as I was. We knew we were being watched. Our first escape attempt occurred the following week. We decided I should discreetly leave an event, claiming to be unwell. During the party, I kept a fake smile, feeling the heavy gazes of the Silver Star agents. I managed to sneak out and find Sarah in a car waiting outside. But as we drove away, I realized a vehicle was following us. "We're being followed, Sarah." My voice was filled with panic. She looked in the rearview mirror and increased the speed. We tried to lose our pursuers, but they were always one step ahead. The car followed us through the dark streets of Los Angeles, and I could feel the growing pressure of the supernatural presence. Finally, we found ourselves at a dead end. Sarah stopped the car and looked at me with desperate eyes. "Eva, get out. Run and don't look back." I hesitated, but the urgency in her voice pushed me out of the car. I ran through the narrow alleys, feeling the darkness envelop me. Behind me, I heard screams and sounds of struggle. When I finally looked back, Sarah's car was empty, and she had disappeared. Fear gripped my chest as I realized Sarah had been captured. I kept running until I reached a cheap motel on the city's outskirts. There, I used the disposable phone Sarah had given me to call the underground network contact. The voice on the other end was calm but full of urgency. "Eva, we know what happened. We will help you, but you must be extremely careful. The agency has ways to track your every move. We need to meet in a safe place." He gave me an address in a desolate neighborhood and hung up. That night I barely slept. The nightmares returned with full force, the dark entities invading my dreams, whispering promises of power and destruction. When the sun finally began to rise, I prepared to meet my contact. I arrived at the location, an abandoned house, with my heart in my throat. A hooded figure awaited me at the door. He led me inside, where other members of the network were gathered. Among them, a man named Alex seemed to be the leader. "Eva, we are aware of what you went through," Alex said, his voice firm. "The Silver Star Agency is more than just a talent agency. They are involved with forces beyond our understanding. We have been working to expose this, but we need concrete evidence." I spent the following days with Alex and his team, gathering information, recording testimonies, and preparing a dossier to expose the truth. The pressure was immense, and the feeling of being watched never disappeared. We knew that at any moment, the agency could find us. We attempted another escape, this time with a more elaborate plan. We used alternative routes and disguises, but the Silver Star seemed always a step ahead. One night, upon returning to the hideout, I found a message written in blood on the wall. "You cannot escape." Reality was closing in on me. I realized the agency not only had eyes and ears everywhere, but also manipulated supernatural forces to track me. Every escape attempt seemed anticipated, every step controlled. Then Alex suggested a last option, a protection ritual that could give us a chance to escape the agency's reach. It was a huge risk, but I was willing to try anything. On the night of the ritual, we gathered in a circle, candles lit, and ancient symbols drawn on the floor. Alex led the ritual, chanting in Latin. The energy in the air was palpable, and I felt an invisible force surround us. But as the ritual progressed, the shadows on the walls began to contort unnaturally. A dark presence manifested, interrupting the ritual. The candles went out, and a cold voice echoed in the room. "You cannot escape. The pact has been sealed." The entity's force threw us to the ground, and darkness enveloped us. I struggled to maintain consciousness, feeling like my very soul was being pulled into the darkness. When I regained consciousness, I was alone in the room. Alex and the others had disappeared. The sense of despair and isolation was overwhelming. I knew my fight was far from over, and the Silver Star Agency was determined to keep me under its control. Desperate and with no options left, I prepared for the next battle, knowing the forces against me were powerful and relentless. Desperation engulfed every decision. With supernatural forces and the Silver Star Agency controlling my every move, the only way out would be to confront those who had trapped me in this nightmare directly and try to escape, even if victory seemed impossible. That night, I decided to return to the Silver Star Agency office. The building, bathed in the cold moonlight, seemed even more threatening. I entered through the main door, my steps echoing in the empty lobby. I was greeted by Henry, who awaited me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Eva, it's a shame it has come to this," he said, his voice smooth and dangerous. "You had so much potential." I walked past him without responding, determined to confront those responsible for the agency. In the conference room, I found the directors in their chairs, surrounded by restless shadows. In the center of the table, an ancient symbol glowed with a sinister light, pulsating like a malignant heart. "You trapped me in a macabre game." My voice trembled with rage and fear. "You manipulated and destroyed lives. This ends here." A cold laugh echoed in the room. A woman with silver hair and piercing eyes stood up, her movements graceful but threatening. "Eva, you don't understand what's at stake." Her voice was seductive and threatening at the same time. "The power we control is not of this world. You are part of an ancient pact, and now you must fulfill your final role." The room began to vibrate with malevolent energy. The shadows on the walls contorted and took the form of dark entities. The symbol on the table glowed intensely, and I felt an invisible force pulling me toward the center of the circle. "You have no way out, Eva," Henry said calmly. "The secret protocol is more than a series of tasks. It is a direct link to the forces that govern this world. And now you must fulfill your final role." The fight seemed lost, but then an explosion of light crossed the room. The underground network, led by Sarah, invaded the space with protective symbols and chants that weakened the dark entities. "Eva, don't give up," Sarah shouted, her voice full of urgency. A desperate battle unfolded. The members of the underground network fought the agency's agents with everything they had, but they were outmatched by the entity's force and power. Screams and sounds of struggle filled the room, while I struggled to reach the malignant symbol in the center of the table. With one last effort, I managed to break the symbol into pieces. A deafening scream echoed through the room, and the entities began to disappear. However, the triumph was short-lived. The underground network members began to fall one by one, brutally killed by the agency's agents. Sarah, gravely injured, crawled to me. "Eva, you need to run." "Now," she coughed, blood running down her lips. "They will blame you for everything. Take this." She placed an envelope in my hands. Inside is a new name, passport, money, flee abroad, and never look back. With tears in my eyes, I saw Sarah succumb to her injuries. I knew she had sacrificed everything to give me a chance to escape. With the envelope clutched to my chest, I ran through the dark corridors of the agency, feeling the malevolent presence dissipate, but the constant threat of the agents still pursuing me. I left the building and blended into the darkness of the night. Using the instructions in the envelope, I reached a safe meeting point, where I managed to board a clandestine flight to Europe. The journey was long and painful, but I finally arrived in a country where I could start anew. Days later, I learned the news. The Silver Star Agency had planted evidence incriminating me for the murders and disappearances of my colleagues. The headlines were clear. Actress Eva Richards wanted for serial murders and kidnappings. My name was tarnished, my life destroyed. I was a fugitive, forced to change my name and identity. I assumed a new life, living in the shadows, always looking over my shoulder. The agency had the power and influence to hunt me wherever I went. But at least I was free from the supernatural forces that once controlled me. The price of freedom was high, and the scars of past battles would remain with me forever. In my new life, I swore never to forget the sacrifice of those who fought alongside me and the terrible truth about the Silver Star Agency's secret protocol. I was alive, but the battle for my soul and sanity continued, in a constant struggle against the ghosts of the past and the shadows that still pursued me. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and watch the next one.